Nikola Jovic is one of the promising young players in Miami's roster, but after earning a starting job last season, what can he do to take an even greater leap? We'll break that down in today's Locked On Heat.
You are Locked On Heat, your daily Miami Heat podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, welcome to Locked On Heat, your daily podcast on the Miami Heat. Whether you're tuning in on YouTube, Odyssey, or your favorite podcast app, thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. I'm Wes Goldberg, editor at allyoucanheat.com, here with David Ramil. Both of us are credentialed Heat media members, and the best way to support the show is to leave a 5-star rating and review on your podcast app, and make sure you hit that subscribe button on YouTube. Big thanks to Gametime for sponsoring today's episode. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. We're taking a deep dive into Nikola Jovic today. We're going to talk about how he can make a leap and if he should start for the Heat next season. But let's just start, David, with some stats from Nico last year. And we're going to talk about, our impressions of him in his first 2 years in Miami and how he can kind of take that next step forward. But some stats from last year, just as a refresher, he played 46 games, started 38 of them, averaged 7.7 points per game on 45, 40, and 70 shooting splits, 4.2 rebounds, and a couple of assists per game. But then in the playoffs, basically all those numbers went up. 9.4 points per game, 6.6 rebounds, 2.2 assists on 44, 41, and 86 shooting splits. He was 47% on corner threes, which I think was a key metric for him because that was a big part of his offensive role. And a little fun stat here, David. The Heat were 3-0 when he scored 20 or more points. What impressed you the most about Jovic's season?
He had such a strong summer last year, and just the fact that he was able to kind of go into camp, and I wonder how that's going to affect him this year too, because last year, obviously, with the FIBA World Cup, it was he had such a breakout during that kind of tournament. And then there was all this confidence, and we saw it, like going to media day, going into training camp. He talked about carrying that confidence moving forward, that he saw himself now as a 20-year-old at that point in time, as somebody who could be a contributor for the team, etc. And then, well, the bottom just fell out. Like, he didn't have a clear role. He didn't have any kind of designated playing time, couldn't really earn any spot, spent some time in the G League. It was all over the place. And so you kind of wonder how that's going to break a young player, if there's potential for it to break a young player. But he weathered that storm. He didn't really succeed in Sioux Falls. That's the ironic part here, is that he didn't really have like a breakout game. He didn't put up monster numbers, but whatever he did behind the scenes. I think you might be right. There was a lingering injury of some kind, or the back issue, was it? I don't remember.
Something like that, yeah.
But either way, it was just like to weather that storm then and not stand out and continue to put on in the work behind the scenes to show the coaching staff and Eric Spoelstra specifically that you deserve more playing time. That's what really stood out to me, is that he just said, you know what? He changed his whole attitude. He changed his approach, realized that he had to earn playing time, particularly on the defensive end, be a little bit more active as a rebounder. And I think we saw growth in both of those areas that led to more and more playing time. And as you said, eventually a starting spot. And I think the fact that he was able to hold it down and just say, you know what, there's no better option on this roster to start alongside Bam Adebayo than I am. And so I think that was really impressive, that as a 20-year-old, that he was able to show that kind of mettle and be able to just withstand not getting playing time, change his approach, earn playing time, and stick with it.
It's a great point, right? Because all the talk during training camp when we were there covering it was, well, mostly it was Jaime Jaquez, but then the other thing that everybody kept saying was Nico, like Jimmy Butler being like, Nico's walking around with his chest out and all these things. We love this confidence. Everybody's just blowing smoke up this guy's behind, and they're just like, yeah, like they're really like lifting him up, and then he doesn't play basically for the first half of the season. And I think a lot of young players would look at that and say, hey, I'm just coming off of this World Cup run. Everybody's been talking me up during training camp. My teammates love me. Why am I not in the rotation? And that wasn't the case with Nico. And by the end of the season, he had emerged as Miami's starting power forward and really the only viable option there to start at power forward. And then he starts in the playoffs, and I love that his numbers got better in that playoffs. Now, there's a lot of context around it. There was no Jimmy Butler. There's no Terry Rozier. Duncan Robinson was hurt. All these guys were injured, and so somebody had to take these shots. But it wasn't just like, hey, somebody's got these take these shots, take these shots. His efficiency went up again too. And that's a huge boost for him. I think he's a gamer. And I know we're only talking about a 5-game sample where the Heat got genuinely swept. I kind of feel like this guy's a gamer, like the guy, when he gets a defensive rebound and just peels off like a car leaving a bank rob job and goes down the court. Like that's like that competitive stuff. That's that understanding the moment. I think he's got really quick twitch instincts and decision-making skills that we can kind of dive into a little bit more when we kind of get into the particulars of his game here. But beyond just the stats, David, it's like the eye test is so strongly in favor of Nikola Jovic. When you watch him play, you're just like, this guy knows how to play basketball. Not only knows how to play basketball, has a good feel for the game, which, and you know this about me, David, like that to me is the most underrated aspect of any basketball player. It's a thing we don't talk enough about when we talk about players' ceilings and what they could be in the NBA. If they have a high level of feel, you could be 6'8", 260. You can look just like LeBron James and have zero basketball feel, and you'll be out of the league in 3 years. We've seen it. Yeah. We've seen it. But if you've got great basketball feel the way that I think Nico does, you could play in the NBA for a long time.
No, I 100% agree. I think it's a really great point because you kind of see, and it's been talked a lot in different ways, sometimes a positive, sometimes a negative, the fundamentals of basketball, the way they're taught differently in EuroLeague and things of that sort. And you could kind of see that with Nico, is that he has this foundation, a really solid base to who he is, but he had to kind of fine tune it, work on his body a little bit. And we saw him. I remember we interviewed him after a practice and like mid-season at some point, and he had bulked up. Like he had put on some serious muscles in order to earn that starting spot. And he's still such a young man. Like he was 20
what his
at that
routine
point.
is.
He's 21.
The guy's he's 6'10". You think about guys that have such a hard time putting on weight in the NBA, and look, a lot of that is just sort of genetics and whatever. But the guy's long and lanky when he got into the NBA as a rookie. Like what is that guy eating? What is that guy's routine? I got to figure it out. We should ask him in media day.
Well, I mean, look, we've seen in comparison, like, Tyler Hero and how his inability to kind of keep that weight over the course of the season. And somehow Nico was putting it on and keeping it. So, yeah, maybe there is a genetic factor involved here. But the fact that he was able to continue to build on that. And it's just, I really think there's the understanding of basketball, as you said, and then the feel for the game. And then now it's the trial by fire of I've proved. I really do think that he is a gamer. Like, I think he's a guy who's not from those moments. And I remember, we were recapping the playoff series. There were shots there late in the shot clock with the ball in his hands, and he just let it fly over a Boston defender. If there was going to be any positive takeaways from those tough losses, it was the fact that he showed out and was able to be impressive as a result. And I think he's going to be able to carry that forward. Like he had a disappointing offseason. There was the injury. He didn't really get to contribute for the Serbian national team. At the same time, I think he goes into camp much more positively, much more comfortable in his role. The kind of nervousness of being the European kid on a roster full of guys competing for a championship, I think that kind of goes away. And now we got to see him. I'd love to see him be able to just embrace it and just say, you know what, this is my team. I'm going to be able to contribute at a high level. His
chest even more out, doubly out now.
Yes,
I think.
And
look, that's a big part of things. And I think the theme that we're hitting on with Nikola Jovic's season is how much he improved from even training camp at the beginning of the year, preseason, whatever, to the end of the season. It was two different players. I mean, it really was. He was by far the most improved player on the Heat roster last year and was a big part of their team in sort of that second stretch. There's no doubt about it. I think offensively, we kind of talked about the stats and some of the things that jump off the screen when we watch him, but defensively, he got so much better. He got better at defensive position. I remember talking to you about this in postgame, like, oh my God, he could do a little bit of rim protection now. Like his help side defense, playing alongside Bam Adebayo, took such a huge leap that I think shocked and surprised the coaching staff. They're like, oh my God, like what this guy is doing. We didn't see this kind of we didn't see him being on this part of the developmental curve or the learning curve just yet. His defensive positioning was better. The rim protection was better. The rebounding numbers that were so bad for him as a rookie, he was 4th on the team in defensive rebounding rate. Now, offensive rebounding rate, bottom of the barrel. He's terrible. Also, some of that is a function of the way that Miami plays. They don't necessarily crash the boards for offensive rebounds. Basically, they have one player do it, who's their center. Jovic is not a center, so whatever. But they should still just be a little bit better by virtue of him being tall. But look, there's moments of him switching. I remember against the Hawks, like there's a couple possessions where he slid his feet with DeJounte Murray and contested a couple of jumpers.
Yeah, he's not getting beat.
Sometimes
he's
he does.
adjusting.
Sometimes he does. Just to be
sure.
Sometimes he definitely does. But that's part and parcel of being a big man in the NBA. Exactly. So there's a lot to like. We're going to dive into the particulars, how he can get better on offense, how he can get better on defense, what his main areas of improvement are. We'll tell you all about that after this on Locked On Heat.
Today's episode of Locked On Heat is brought to you by Gametime. Who doesn't love going to shows, concerts, live music? I mean, you just went to go see Green Day in Atlanta. I had just gone to go see Fish a couple of weeks ago. Like, you know, I'm so bummed out. They're not really having a fall tour now, so I can't use Gametime to get tickets. But if they were, believe me, I would be right there because it is so convenient to get all the tickets that you're looking for. And now with football season, whether it's watching the University of Miami or watching the Dolphins or whoever your team might be, use Gametime, and it's really the most convenient place to do so. If you're looking for tickets for any sporting event, concert, comedy show, whatever. Gametime's got a new feature even called Gametime Picks. It makes getting tickets for your favorite events even easier. It kind of filters out all the fluff to show you only the incredible deals on the great seats that you're looking for, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. And again, there's so many different features about Gametime that make it easy. Their all-in pricing is a big one. No worry about hidden fees or anything like that. What you see is what you'll pay for. There's seat views so that you can know exactly where you're going to be. If you're in a city that you're not familiar with or in a venue that you've never been to, you'll know exactly where you are, so there's no obstruction of whatever you're trying to see. And again, there's lowest price guarantee. Gametime will credit you up to 110% of the difference if you can find a different price. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA, and you get $20 off your first purchase. Now, terms do apply, but if you create an account and redeem the code LOCKEDONNBA, you get $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it?
Game time. Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen of the day. For your second listen, enjoy the Locked On NBA podcast. There's no offseason in the NBA, and Locked On NBA provides daily basketball analysis from national and local experts in 30 minutes or less. No one keeps you as informed or entertained as Locked On NBA. It's available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. It's a must subscribe, people. It's a must subscribe, especially during the season, but even right now, as we kind of get into the nuts and bolts of the season, training camp coming up, media days. If you really want to know about the Miami Heat, you got to know about the rest of the league too, right? It helps give you context, helps provide a little bit of that kind of stuff. All right, anyway. So when it comes to Nikola Jovic, I think the thing that makes him special and a potential game changer. You and I talk a lot on this show about like what's that one thing that makes you elite or very good or top. What's like the one thing that you're top 5% in the league at? And I think his ability to turn a defensive rebound into a scoring opportunity is his most impressive attribute. It's rare. I'm trying to think of who it reminds me of, and I don't know if I've made this comp to you on the show, but I think I have definitely done it before. But it reminds me a little bit of Russell Westbrook, the way that he just grabs a rebound, turns around, like in a good way.
Yeah,
I think Russell Westbrook was like a schmuck
no,
for 15 years.
No. I'm just talking about it. Doesn't
hyperbole?
It doesn't quite connote the explosive athleticism of Russ in his prime on a fast break. But I hear what you're saying.
Let me explain. Like when you grab that defensive rebound and when you turn and you know exactly where you're going and you have the ball handling skills to get down the court in a hurry. That's rare. And I think with Nico, his combination of size and ball handling skills and speed, like the guy's fast. I think we never talk about, he's a fast basketball player. He's got those long legs, and he runs fluidly. And that combination is a transition monster. His points per possession in transition are like off the charts. That's the thing to me that makes him special, not just in a vacuum, which is certainly the case, but especially doubly so on this Miami Heat team that can't score a lick even when they try hard. Right. Especially in transition, they have a hard time. They have a hard, but that's what makes those transition opportunities so important for them. Is okay. Let's turn our defense, the thing that we hang our hat on, into offense. You hear Eric Spoelstra talk about it all the time. Nikola Jovic is a great weapon in doing that.
Yeah, no, 100%. I'm not sure about the Russ comp, but I get it. In terms of his ability to see something, there's a purposefulness to this, and I know that sounds kind of hyperbolic or a little bit spoish in our assessment, but he. We were talking about in the first segment, his understanding and feel, the comfort level as a big man who can dribble and create plays for himself and others. that is, I think, a combination of things that we see when he has those fast break opportunities. Because you're right, he does dribble well for a big man. He is fluid enough. I don't know if he's fast necessarily, but he is quicker than you would expect for a person his size. And that,
Yeah,
in
he's not
combination
De'Aaron
with
Fox
everything
in the
else,
open court, but he gets down the court
right,
in a hurry.
right. And again, it's their sense of understanding purpose. Like, I know what I'm doing. I'm not shying away from it. You see other bigs and they're kind of like, oh, let me kind of mess around and see what I can do. Maybe I'll be able to create something out of nothing, whatever. But no, he is locked in. He knows, I'm going to push this. I'm going to try and get an opportunity at the rim.
Yeah.
And if I can't, then either I'll dish it off to somebody, a trailer or something like that, or find somebody open, flare it out to a 3-point shooter and see if I can create some offense that way. And I think it's so effective. And I think it's such a big part of what makes him elite. And I think it's why I really thought that he would eventually turn into more of a point forward. We saw him kind of evolve into more of a big role, but I still think there's that for him to embrace some of that point. But, again,
can I stop
the
you
idea
there?
of positions. Sure.
Because the Heat did start as the end of the season as we got closer to the end of the season. It seemed like every first Miami Heat possession was initiated by Nico. Right. And so it was a play for him to initiate, right? Whether it was scoring or passing to somebody else. They're trying to tap into that. I think what the point that you're getting to, though, with the positions, it's like, okay, we get comments all the time. Like, Nico should be the point guard. It's like, who cares what he is? If he's a point guard or a point power forward. LeBron James was the team's power forward for years, and he ran the offense. It doesn't matter.
Right.
Again, not trying to compare Nikola Jovic to Russell Westbrook and LeBron James in one episode. That's not
I love
my
it.
intent here.
I love it.
But,
I think so. I think it's a good comp.
Yeah, it fits. I do have some comps later that I want to get to that I'm not totally sold on. I kind of want to get your opinion on them. But
all right.
The idea that because you can pass, he should be your point guard is such an old school way of thinking about the NBA. It's not the way it works. You need multiple. Basically, everybody on the court needs to be able to pass and dribble.
Right.
And Nikola Jovic
shoot,
can do that.
Ideally.
And shoot, ideally. But I think even more important, pass and dribble. And then hopefully you've got like 3 really good shooters, and then the 2 other guys could do stuff, whatever. Let's talk about where he can improve. What's the thing that you're thinking when you look at him? What's the main thing that you say, all right, this is if I'm the Heat's coaching staff in training camp, the one thing I'm stressing is what?
I don't have an answer for this because honestly, I think, and we were talking about this in the first segment, like the base of his game is so pretty solid, and it's just a matter of him getting more playing time. So I would say specifically just improve overall as a defender, but on a macro view, I think just kind of being a little bit more aggressive. Again, I think there's you don't want to step on toes, especially when you get drafted at 19. You played in Europe. This is a completely different world than
but he's getting to year 3. It's not Europe anymore. He's been in Miami for 3 years now. Yeah.
Right. Luka's one of one. But I remember talking to no one. I mean, that guy is as basketball savant as you're gonna get. Like,
and an alpha among alphas also. Like he's like, this is my first time in the United States. I'm president now. Yeah. Like he doesn't care.
Right. English, no English. Get out of my way. You're not better than I am. So like I remember talking to Goran, like after he'd already been a Heat player for some time, and just like talking about the transition about being a basketball player in the United States and having a hard time with English and things of that sort. Like those things matter. And so the idea that Nico's just going to slide in day one and be like, all right, this is my team again, not Luka.
But he has taken such big improvements on there too. Like even you and I, we're not his teammates, but we're around, and he'll just come up to reporters like us and just be just start like just shooting the breeze.
Right.
In not his first language. Like, and I feel like it's like it's almost like him practicing a little bit, like his English a little bit. Like, he's very comfortable in front of the media, and that's the whole thing about it, walking with his chest out. Is that's sort of what it means is he don't care if his English is a little bit broken. He's gonna talk to you anyway because that's what he wants to do.
Absolutely. So if he can kind of take that, bottle it, and improve on it, and just be like, you know what, year 3, as you said, now is the time for me to make my mark. You kind of have to get your feet wet and everything else, but now it's a matter of just being able to be a more aggressive and a better version of the player that you were last year.
So aggressiveness in, I think, just the way he approaches the game, taking more shots, being willing to explore more of his game. I agree on all of that stuff. I would also say this. He needs to be more physical. And if I'm the Heat's coaching staff, I'm going to say, hey, crush dudes. Put your elbows into guys. Foul him. I don't care. You got to be more of a physical player. His defensive rebounding rate was better. His offensive rebounding rate needs to be a lot better. His screen setting needs to be a lot better. Like, he should be watching Bam Adebayo level guys, and he should be looking on the bruises on the two-way guys' chest and say, and Bam needs to be, you got to put those bruises on their chest also. Like, he needs to get more physical. And that's not new. I think that's something that has been stressed, and that's a process of him growing into his body. And we've already talked about the gains and all these things. But I mean, even like playing with more physicality and being willing to get to the basket more. He shot 55% at the rim last year. It was about 70% towards the end of last season. Smaller sample, obviously. There's no reason a guy with his ball skills and at his height shouldn't be shooting 70%, 65% at the basket. But part of that is physicality, not being a finesse player, not falling away from the basket or floating away from it, but going right into it with your elbows out and your hand up. I think some of that stuff will come with time, but that would be the thing in training camp. I'm like, hey, that's what kind of get you to that next level. Like the finesse ball skills, the feel for the game, the basketball IQ, the passing. We love all of that. The thing that's going to take you up to the next level and get you into games to maybe close games, get you more minutes, where you could turn into like a legitimate starter and not like a Luke Babbitt token starter. It's going to be that physicality. And that would be the main thing. And then once you get that, the screen setting is better. The rebounding gets better. The finishing at the rim gets better. That aggressiveness probably gets better. It all kind of comes with it. But that would be the one thing I would be focusing on with him.
It'll be a challenge for him because he has to kind of marry this aggression that we're talking about and at the same time continue to at least be as efficient as he was last year, particularly with his shooting. But, the fact that he made leaps as you look at his per 36 numbers, and as a rookie, obviously he didn't get much playing time, but he was mostly concentrating on just putting the ball up. But last year you saw him kind of take strides as a playmaker and still be able to balance that scoring touch. So now it's just taking it to that next level and kind of, again, combining it with the aggression that we're talking about. So it's going to be a challenging year for him, but I think he's got some potential. I think he's going to be a great player next season.
Should he start next season? We'll talk about that next.
Today's episode is brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships, that's also what keeps your car alive. And eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers to roof racks, exhaust kits to LED headlights, and so much more, whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. And with over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. With eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber and not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. So keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only and exclusions do apply. And eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. We'll be right back.
Thanks again for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. If you're new to us on YouTube, hit that subscribe button. You can also follow us on your favorite podcast app. Leave a 5-star rating and review. It's always appreciated. All right, I want you to rank the following players in order of how likely they are to start, understanding that Jimmy Butler, Bam Adebayo, obviously they're in Sharpie in the starting lineup. Those other three spots very much up in the air. So rank the following players in order of how likely they are to start for the Heat. Nikola Jovic, who we're talking about today. Tyler Hero. Terry Rozier, Khalil Ware, Jaime Jaquez, Haywood Highsmith.
Wow, that's a tough one. I would put Hero top of the list.
Okay.
I would put Rozier second on that list and likeliness of starting, and I would put Nico third on that. And
then everybody else.
With everybody else, the field after that. Yeah. I just don't see Highsmith emerging as a starter despite his defense and everything else like that. We talked about it before. There's a potential for him to be a closer, and I think that's going to be certainly something that we can consider. Him and Jaquez, I think, for different reasons, but I think both of them have the potential to be closers rather than starters. But I just don't think that Ware's going to be ready right away. And that being the case, I think you have to look at what Nico has shown and is capable of. And if he continues to take that leap that we're talking about in this episode, then I think he's a clear option as a starter alongside Bam.
I might put him number one on that list.
Over Tyler and over Terry Rozier?
I might, because there is a potential there for Eric Spoelstra say, we're not going to start Tyler Hero and Terry Rozier. We know that the Heat aren't sold on that as a starting backcourt. They kind of had to figure it out. And if they decide, you know what, let's just move one of these guys into a six-man role, it kind of becomes 50-50 between which one of them comes off the bench and which one of them starts. We've had that conversation. We could do it another time. But to me, Nikola Jovic is the only real power forward on the Heat's roster. I am
other than
close.
Bam and Adebayo.
Well, Bam's Bam's going to be a center, and you're being facetious.
A little bit, but I mean, the idea from some fans is that Ware could start at center and Bam could slide down. So, yes,
fans don't make the decisions though, and as we've seen, Bam is the starting center in today's NBA. So, I mean, of course, maybe one day Khalil Ware will start at center and Bam will start at power forward, but as you and I anticipate, probably not day one for the rookie, right? And so, I think that not only should Nikola Jovic start, he might be in Penn at this point. He might be closer to being in Penn. Okay, so if you got levels of this, and I'm doing something completely silly right now, but if Bam and Jimmy are Sharpie, right? And then you've got these other guys in pencil, like Nico might be somewhere in the middle, just like in a ballpoint pen, somewhere in the middle of those three guys, just because he's the only power forward on the Heat's roster. And I don't really see like a lineup that makes a lot of sense on opening night. A starting lineup that doesn't include Nikola Jovic. You could go Jimmy Butler and Jaime Jaquez on the perimeter. I don't think that Eric Spoelstra wants to do that. I think they prefer having Jaime be Jimmy Butler's backup. You're giving up so much size if you've got 6'6" Jaime, 6'7" Jimmy Butler, and 6'9", 6'10" Bam Adebayo as your forwards and center. Like there's just not enough size on the roster with that. So you need the guy who's 6'10", 6'11" with a 7-foot wingspan in Nikola Jovic, kind of out there. And by the way, I think that's why Eric Spoelstra defaulted to Nikola Jovic last year, is because he's the only true power forward on the roster. And even though Caleb Martin wasn't a true power forward, he's not even on the team anymore. So you've got even fewer options than you did last year.
But one, Caleb was hurt. That's probably why he wasn't starting at power forward over him. And I think that's probably the case.
But he's gone now.
He is also gone. But then you've seen Spo in the past. You know what? We'll start over either Terry Rozier, and we'll bring Haywood Highsmith in as a possible fifth starter. So I think that balanced offense could make up for whatever machinations Spo might have in mind here. So that would be probably either Rozier or Hero starting alongside Duncan, Jimmy obviously alongside Highsmith, and then Bam as your starting center.
Potentially. I would not.
You've talked about this lineup before.
Yeah, I'm obviously not ruling anything out, but I still think like he could have started Highsmith last year and he didn't. Highsmith
was also hurt too.
And healthy. Highsmith wasn't hurt.
No. Yes, he was. He did miss time. He absolutely missed time.
Towards the end of the year, he was there.
Yeah. I mean,
he was there in the playoffs, all these things. But
sure. You mean as a starter, like in the playoffs?
Yeah,
I mean,
he's still,
at that point,
he's stuck
at
with
that
Nico.
point, you're kind of reaching for straws. Yeah, you're right. But I mean, no Jimmy. You're kind of going into this Boston series, and I know Spo would never in a million years, under any kind of form of torture whatsoever, admit to this. But you're kind of going into this against the Celtics and going, we haven't got a prayer. Let me just stick with what we can and see what we have in this young player. So I think that was more about testing Nico and seeing how he responded, and I think he passed that test.
I don't know. Like I said, it's not in Sharpie. It's not a Jimmy or Bam level, but I think he's got a better, like the odds of him starting, I think are higher than anybody else that we talked about. I don't know. I think Highsmith and Nico could start, but that's the lineup that I was talking about, where you have Highsmith as a shooting guard because he's not a power forward. Where you've got either that's my preferred starting lineup is Hero or Rozier. I don't really care which one. Highsmith, Jimmy, Nico, and Bam. I think you have enough switchable size on the perimeter to make up for Bam not being the biggest center in the NBA, and you've got enough playmaking between Jimmy and either Hero or Rozier, whichever one you decide to start, and then the other one obviously comes off the bench. But who knows? Who knows what Eric Spoelstra is going to decide? I guess we'll find out. Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Like, comment, and subscribe on YouTube. Follow us on your favorite podcast app.